What's the most outdated piece of tech you refuse to get rid of to this day? My daughter still has a VCR. She recently turned 22. But she still likes VHS videos. She also has a Super Nintendo. That's all that I can remember off the top of my head. But we probably have other things. Still likes VHS videos. Hell yeah! VHSs of Prince of Egypt and Road to El Dorado have mega mileage on them. Can remember getting a DVD and having to find a player to watch. High School Musical 2 for those wondering. My Commodore 64 still works. But it's just packed away right now. I also have almost all of my GPUs from previous computer builds going back to my first Voodoo card and RIVA 128. Me too. Cause. You know. Those boxes of pirated games from BBSs aren't going to play themselves. My blender was passed down from my grandmother who was gifted it in her 20s. She's now in her 70s. Honestly, the thing is a pile of junk compared to modern blenders. But I'm a cheap ass bitch, so I make do. My dad bought the blender I use now back in the early 60s. It's going on 60 years old now and still works great. I have an antique coffee grinder I bought on eBay and it has to be 50s or 60s, but it's beeping fantastic. Built like a brick beep house. Not a bit of plastic on it, all wood and metal, and it grinds my coffee just how I like it. Mechanical wristwatches are 99% outdated tech that's over-engineered to be as complicated as possible for the smallest diminishing returns when a quartz/electronic/digital watch does the same but cheaper. It takes a mechanical watch costing about $120,000 to have a split chronograph function. You know what else does that? A 10 Casio digital watch. But I love them and they're so artistically made. I don't own one of those Lang & Sony double splits. Of course. But they're mad cool regardless. I do have some other mechanical watches I wear regularly. Mechanical watches are also really fun to work on. They can be super simple. Or really complex. I believe that. I could imagine it being a fun hobby for myself to pursue were I to ever have the extra time on my hands, which I most certainly do not have right now. The legendary Nokia to play that snake game on weekends. Ah. The 3310. Yes. Old Reddit. It loads much faster than the new Reddit. Is one of the most effective and thoughtfully designed user interfaces I've ever encountered. New Reddit is a poster child of a poorly designed UI. It's slow, clunky, and inconvenient. I have a slide rule that belonged to a great-grandfather. And he was the one who taught me to use it. It sits on my desk and I still use it for quick math. I've tried to explain how it works to my kids. But they just call it wizardry and remind me my phone has a calculator. I was at a birthday party a couple of years ago where the birthday boy was given a slide rule as a gag gift to remind him how old he was. I was the only one of the younger generation at the party who knew how to use it, admittedly after some fiddling to remind myself of the basics. I'm still overly proud of myself about it. I was also informed that it was magic and that we'd all have calculators in our pockets now. TI-83. Literally decades old from my high school days. Still works like a charm and still actively in use on my office desk. What do you mean outdated? It's not like anyone is innovating in the graphing calculator space. Sure, the TI-89 is better. But it's banned on enough tests that it doesn't really matter. You're forgetting there's also TI-83, TI-84, TI-Nspire, and TI-84 before you get to TI-89. So it's quite outdated. Even more so if you consider people using cell phones with Wolfram Alpha instead these days. Several ThinkPads and IBM machines from the early 2000s. My first computer, which was an AMD K2 rig. My current laptop's a decade-old MacBook LMAO. Nice. I still use a 2012 from time to time. And a 2015 on a daily basis. My 2015 suffered a fall during a move, so now just sits on my desk with a few monitors hooked up. I've had the same broom for 40 years. Only 12 new heads and 8 new handles in all that time. The broom of Theseus. My DVD player. I converted my extensive VHS collection to DVDs back in the early 2000s, and I'll be arsed to convert it to Blu-ray or whatever the next technology is. I've been told multiple times. Something to the effect. Who still owns physical copies of movies anymore? Some people seem to be very comfortable with just browsing through whatever streaming services they have and watching whatever movie is available. Like how I remember flipping through channels on TV. But I really like watching my favorite movies. Rather than watching the best movie I can find on Netflix right now. I feel even more validated doing this when people start complaining about X show or Y movie being only available on streaming in the stretched version. The Speepty remaster. Etc. I have a Singer sewing machine passed down from my grandmother that's nearly a century old. However, it's much better than any of the cheap plastic ones currently on the market. Every time I get it cleaned, people offer ridiculous amounts of money for it because it's still in pretty good condition and widely accepted as one of the best models ever made. But for that very reason I still haven't sold it. Even though I could probably use the money. It means a lot to me and I still use it fairly often. Dude. Those old Singers are workhorses. Don't ever get rid of it. No one mentions old cameras? Well, I'll start. I still use 1930s German medium format camera. Well, it is crap. You can't even focus with it correctly. Because you have to guess your distance to target. It is expensive to shoot because it uses 120 film. But it is fun to shoot with it. It have its own charm. None of my other cameras feel the same. Even 50s or 80s cameras feel complicated and high-tech compared to this one. I think there's an argument to be made for gear that's kind of obtrusive and imperfect that makes you be mindful of what you're doing in a way that really slick tech doesn't. Obviously not in every case, but this sounds like one of them. I have a metal toaster from the 50s and will keep that thing going as long as possible. They don't make appliances that pretty anymore. Does it look like an Airstream? I have the same microwave my mother had when she was in college almost 40 years ago. It's small but still completely functional. So I use it in my office. I really doubt the larger one in my kitchen will still be working in 40 years. I'm surprised it's small. Both my family and my husband's family kept their 1980 Amana Radaranges until they died in the early 2000s and 2017, respectively. But they were enormous and heavy. My Game Boys. Pretty sure they're old enough to be game men now. My audio cassettes. I have a few things on tape that I'll never be able to find anywhere else. Doesn't matter if I no longer have a cassette player. At least I still have the tapes. I realize that this is not rational. If you can get them converted to MP3, that would be great. Battle for the Middle-earth. I don't know about outdated. Have they made any quality RTS games based on the Tolkienverse since then? BFME2. An MP3 player that takes one AAA battery and has a slot for an SD card up to 32 grams. And every song on there is banging. Diamond Rio by chance? RCA. Little orange and silver thing has gone cross-country and has kept the music playing. I actually got a few SD card as playlists for long trips. My zoons. I do believe a dedicated music player with mass internal storage and hardware buttons are something that phones do not adequately replace. Up until my current phone Samsung S10. I used a separate MP3 player, a Sony Walkman MP3 player actually. Worked great. I could load movie and pictures on it if I wanted to. And it was smaller than my phone, so easy to fit in my pocket. Now with my current phone I have enough disk space and Spotify with enough data. I don't worry about running out that my phone's finally replaced the MP3 player. But I still have it in a desk drawer. Just in case.